How often do you think about the pandemic? Really, think about the pandemic because, like they say, COVID is no joke. And if you are like many Americans at the beginning, you may have joined even 24% of atheists who began for the first time in life to pray, or helped defeat a frenzy of sales of the Bible, breaking sales records like never before. Perhaps when you get really, really desperate for answers, even a Santa Claus in heaven ain't no joke. According to Pew Research Center, as many as 57% of African Americans and Latinos perceive COVID-19 infection as a personal health threat to themselves, while elderly Americans residing in nursing homes from the beginning began to contribute to over half of the nation's fatalities to a novel coronavirus. But how many times since the lockdowns and the masking mandates have you found reason to pause from your normal routine and felt a little concerned when suddenly you developed a runny nose or had a cough or any other flu-related symptom and thought, if only for a second with your badass self, that you might have to get tested for COVID-19? Because COVID, like they say, ain't no joke. According to researchers at the Data Institute at the University of San Francisco, pandemics are historically associated with feelings of fear, confusion, and despair. It's all right to cry. It might make you feel better. And at least for now, this edginess, sense of fear, and powerlessness has become your new normal. And for just about everyone else. But according to Ralph Northam, the nation's only physician serving as a state governor and former Army surgeon, symbols are important. And the facial coverings that we are mandated to wear serve two unique purposes. First, to provide us feelings of empowerment and efficacy in the pandemic. And second, to provide us with a constant reminder of the pandemic so as to enforce more compliance. But have you ever thought about exactly how we got to this point and how suddenly everything that once was normal had suddenly changed, finding nearly everyone running from a single strand of RNA? On February 24th, 2020, the World Health Organization completed the largest sample-size tracer contact study to that date, as epidemiologists and infectious disease control experts do. A robust examination of over 55,000 laboratory-confirmed cases in China. And it was the opinion of those world public health authorities that nations to which the pathogen had spread would be best served if they fully educated the general public on the seriousness of COVID-19 and their unique roles in preventing its spread, besides those on the front line, so that they could make an informed choice about their personal safety. And according to military regulations, FM 101-5 to be specific, decision-making is a combination of art and science that involves knowing if it is necessary to decide, then, when, and what to do when you decide. And Army regulations take the deliberate steps to dictate a methodical 7-step process for military leaders and their supporters to address novel contingencies, just like the ones that have become the new normal for every American, just like you. Because COVID ain't no joke. When there is sufficient lead time in the military, this process normally begins with the issue of a warning order to provide sufficient details to begin to prepare for more elaborate instructions, like the declaration of a PHEIC on January 31st. But always, at some very early stage, proceeds to a clear communication of a mission statement to all leaders, like the pandemic declaration, and is disseminated down to every soldier in that command so that they know what they are facing and what they are supposed to do when they confront the enemy and how to attack it, providing more than just therapeutic value, attaboys, but equipping them with the essentials to survive and complete the mission. Those steps are receipt of the mission, detailed mission analysis, course of action development, course of action analysis, course of action comparison, course of action approval, and finally, orders production. This systematic process becomes increasingly difficult if you are under pressures imposed by a reasonable apprehension of grave bodily harm or death, essentially an undue influence, imposing extortionate pressures, which tend to degrade the abilities of most persons to make the best decisions because they crack under pressure. If COVID-19 is not a joke, have you engaged in a deliberate process like the military to ensure your safety? Or are you just relying upon what you were told to do as a person already declared to be non-essential? Because on the battlefield, non-essential people die. If you have been following the news, President Biden appears to be focusing on the trade war with China and issues of climate change, while the communist regime has increased crackdowns on citizens in Hong Kong and exhibited military aggression in the Sino-Pacific region, testing this nation's will, and had already, according to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, began denying the contractual rights of American businesses in China in their courts of law as far back as January 2019, almost a year before the pandemic that has you scared. You may or may not be aware, even if you have served in the military or law enforcement, that under the joint doctrine of our military services, terrorism is defined as the calculated use of unlawful violence or threat of unlawful violence to inculcate fear, intended to coerce or to intimidate governments or societies, less aggressive in pursuit of the goals that are generally political, religious, or ideological. Has a novel coronavirus chumped you, presenting a threat that has inculcated any fear in you that has adversely affected your politics, your religion, or your ideology? If so, that is a spectacular achievement for a single strand of RNA, but perhaps only hilarious to a scientist, because viruses can't laugh. Under the joint doctrine of our military services, terrorism ranges from individual acts of damage or destruction to highly sophisticated operations conducted by organized extremist groups with social, environmental, religious, economic, or political agendas. And historically, dating back as far as 1347 and even back to the 4th century BC, biological warfare, because of the ability of the enemy to hide its hand, has always been conducted surreptitiously, exploiting the element of surprise. And under joint doctrine of our military services, which to date, despite possessing an active duty force with over 1.3 million active duty personnel in uniform, has only sustained about a dozen fatalities. A prevention plan focuses not upon attempting to defend against an invisible enemy in panic when you are engaged in an attack against them, but rather by recognizing the unique vulnerabilities of that exist in a terrorist's plan, operations, and support functions for the purpose of denying resources to those terrorists and terrorist networks. And this is critical to countering the ideological support of terrorism that military planners have known for years, have been working jointly around the world with criminal organizations, other activist organizations, and have an entire network around the world. A pathogen arising from the most abundant biological particles in the world that had before COVID-19 only presented a total of 220 viruses harmful to man has already made you so terrified as to abandon everything that you once knew as normal, leaving you praying for the end of a pandemic, and has, at least according to science, attained superiority over you a rational person through gains of function acquired through natural selection, and where I, a novel coronavirus consisting of a single strand of RNA, measured in nanoparticle units described as microns that would require 350 to fill a period on a standard piece of paper, I must admit that even if science would not allow me, if I was a COVID-19 causative agent that is no joke to you, I'd be laughing my superior ass off. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for governor of Virginia. I ask that every Virginian and American true, like the motto of the infantry, follow me, and we shall overcome. Honest. And y'all come back now. Yeah.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.